Zen 3 increases our lead in overall performance. It increases our lead in power efficiency. And also now, it delivers the best single-threaded performance in gaming.
Ryzen launches their Zen 3 7nm processors with the Ryzen 9 5950X being the flagship processor to beat out all processors in its class. And Zen 2 Ryzen owners cry. With 4 new releases announced from AMD, we're looking at products from the Zen 2 lineup, like mine, the Ryzen 7 3700X, and wondering, do we really need to get a processor on the Zen 3 platform if we have this already in our computer? And the answer is probably no, which is why I'm bringing this video today on overclocking the Ryzen 7 3700X and boosting the performance out of the rest of your equipment so you can avoid buying into the Zen 3 when 2021 will bring us Zen 3 Part 2. The reality is that if you're like me and you purchased the Ryzen 7 3700X or one of the other variations, then you're looking and scratching your head at Zen 3 because you paid a pretty nominal price to get in with pretty good performance, actually phenomenal performance, that just hadn't been done for that price again. So why, when you spent about $300 on the 3700X Ryzen 7 processor just no less than a year ago, would you go out and spend close to $400 on the new Zen 3 5800X or above? I am totally content with my 3700X as my daily driver. That's why I want to go over with you today 3 easy overclocks that you can set by yourself at home to eke out all the performance that you can out of your current PC. I'm going to cover overclocking the Ryzen 7 3700X. So I'll be using 4 benchmarks today. One is going to be Premiere Pro. I've got about a 4-minute video we're going to render. We're going to test that. We're going to be testing Borderlands 3. Those are the 2 real-world performance benchmarks that I'm going to be doing, and then I'll be doing 2 synthetic benches. One is Cinebench R20 to get a bit of RAM capability and CPU capability, and then I'll be using Heaven to kind of get some benchmarks on what an overclock to your GPU can do while having an all-core overclock on your CPU. So let's dive into the overclocks that are going to save you a pretty penny and save yourself from spending extra for the Zen 3 while retaining Zen 2 with the Ryzen 7 3700X. And before we do, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and please share this with all your friends so they can see what we're doing here. So whether you choose to use my overclocks, which I'll be posting all of the descriptions, all of the kind of how-tos, the numbers for my overclocks and what I did. I am using a limited BIOS through MSI because I did upgrade it. It's an X470 platform. I updated the BIOS for Ryzen 3000. So the first one that I want to get into is, of course, the Gaming Overclock. And realistically, your processor is going to make a bit of a difference, but it's not going to be the biggest difference out of your three main components of CPU, RAM, and GPU. So with this overclock, what I am going to do is overclock not only my CPU to an all-core overclock, so I know I'm getting consistent performance out of the CPU no matter what's going on. I am going to do an overclock of the GPU, and I'm going to do an overclock of the RAM. So most importantly is going to be that GPU. Now it really depends on what you have. I'm running pretty much an all AMD system. So what I'll be doing is going into the Radeon settings, and I'll be doing their automatic overclock. For MSI motherboards, you want to go to the overclocking portion of the BIOS. What I'm going to be changing is the CPU ratio. 42 is what I need, so I'll go ahead and do that. I can always update that core voltage, but it is not recommended to really go over about 1.45. I could probably go auto and it would work just fine. Now we're going to adjust DRAM frequency. So as you can see, I've already done some playing around here, but if you have an XMP profile, you'll want to disable this. Do not enable because it may automatically boot into an XMP profile that isn't actually what we want. So we want to disable it, and we want to do an automatic, and we want to go to DRAM frequency. In most motherboards, you're going to get a drop-down menu that looks very much like this. Again, it's different to each motherboard, okay? So just know where yours is. For mine, it's DRAM frequency, and I'm able to go ahead and just set it here. Like I said, I want 33 for my gaming. I want a 4.2 frequency on the CPU, and all I have to do from this point is hit the F10 button. Yes. Okay, so here I have a couple of softwares that I'll be able to inspect and make sure that that overclock actually held. The most common and probably widely known as the most accurate is definitely going to be CPU Z. I'll see my core voltage at 1.4 volts, and then down here I'll see the core speed, 4199 megahertz. Yeah, pretty nice. Definitely held. It's a times 42 multiplier, so we know that it's reading properly, and I have 1.4 volts going to the CPU. If you want to check memory, you can go ahead and take a look here. Remember, this is dual data rate. So 1666 times 2 is 3333. I'm also going to look at Ryzen Master, 4200 across the board. Very, very nice. One thing I want to mention here is I do want to make sure for this overclocking that I am changing my cooling settings, my fan curves, whether you use a software or it's in the motherboard. I'm going to do this one at performance because I know it's about to get warm. You can hear my fans kick up. That being said, for this video, I'm going to keep it on silent so you guys don't hear them. At least for this part. When I do the bench tests, I'll put it up to performance for you. Now, the last thing that we're going to want to do is come into the Radeon settings right here. And if you're in home, this is going to be under performance, tuning, and it'll give you the option to overclock. Now this works for any RX 5000 series GPU. You can do it through MSI, you can do it your own way. So it's going to be set to default. What you'll do is hit overclock GPU. It'll say warning, tell you their kind of warning statement, and you go ahead and hit proceed. And we're at 2074 megahertz. And we can see our standard is 2024 for the megahertz core clock. So doing that overclock unleashes about 50 megahertz more to the GPU, which is probably about the max it can actually handle without going above limits, which we don't want to do here. So something that I'm not fully able to utilize with my X470 using Ryzen 3000 is profiles of my motherboard. And I did have this previously on the Ryzen 2000 that I utilized, but if you have profiles in your motherboard, I would strongly urge you to save each one of these profiles for gaming. Now we're talking about editing, and then of course next up is your all-day overclock. But let's dive into the editing, overclocking, and see what we need to do that. So here we are inside of the MSI BIOS here. Again, this is going to look a little bit different. If you've used the X470 platform and updated to Ryzen 3000, it will look like this. If not, and you're using X570, it'll look like the traditional MSI BIOS. Probably red and black and has a few more advanced options, but we can get the job done here. So this is going to be the Editing Overclock. We're going to focus on RAM and CPU, and we're going to push the limits. I want 4400 megahertz all-core overclock. I am going to have to take this voltage of the CPU, and I'm probably going to have to raise it to 1.45. Again, you can try this in auto if you'd like. Honestly, the rule typically is you start high and work your way down to figure out what is stable. Next thing I want to do, I want to max out where I think I need to be on RAM, and that's 3600 megahertz. Now I'm going to go down to DRAM voltage, and I'm going to pump this bad boy up to 1.4. Now that I've done that, you guys might be asking the question of, how are you actually going to get the best performance without touching any other settings? Well, to be honest, the truth is AMD has done a great job with their motherboard specs to the board partners, and a lot of these auto settings will work within these parameters. But if they don't, you may need to get involved in a forum. This is not a how-to video. It's essentially what results are we getting utilizing these settings and what limits can we push. So let's F10 out of this, see if we get a boot. With any good overclock comes a lot of trial and error, and that's really what happened. So if you get to the point that I did where your system does not boot into Windows, there's a couple troubleshooting steps you can do. You can kind of reboot, see if it'll let you get into the BIOS. If it does not let you reboot, go ahead and clear your CMOS by either shorting the 2 pins while the system is off if you're using MSI or another board that supports this, or pulling the CMOS battery out of the motherboard for a good while, probably 5, 10, 15 minutes, kind of depending. So look that up before going ahead and doing that, then you'll be able to get back into the BIOS. So we were looking to do 4.6. I don't know that we'll be able to, or 4.4. I don't know that we'll be able to do 4.4. I'm going to do 43.5 as my ratio, and I'm going to bring down that voltage a little bit. 3600 might be a little high, so let's go a notch lower. And this is kind of how it works. Like I said, you guys, you go in, you get your max levels that you want. Let's see, look at that, 1.47. Let's leave that to auto. Let's see what happens. Let's change that DRAM voltage to 1.4. F10 out of here. Let's see if we get a nice boot. Okay, it looks like we didn't get a boot, but it is not crashing the system. So it could be that I need to set that voltage a little bit higher. I'm going to go to 1.425 and see what happens. All right, we have a boot. And we have a crash. So I know this is not CPU or RAM related. If it's RAM related, my system actually does 2 forced retries and then boots me right back into the setup menu. So I'm going to try to pop it down to 43.25. I don't think this is going to be perfect, but I'm in. Maybe what I'll do is get in and fine tune this a bit so I know for sure that my system is running the way it should. Yeah, like I said, we'll do one more. I'm actually going to take this DRAM frequency. I'm going to turn it down a little bit, 3466. I can do a little bit more on the voltage for the CPU. So again, we just updated the voltage to 1.435 for the CPU. We turned down the DRAM frequency a little bit. Okay, so inside you can see our core voltage is 1.44 and we can see our frequency is just about 4324. Let's look at the RAM. Again, 3466. I think this is easy to do if you have a good kit. Let's go ahead and give this a quick little test. Oh, I do want to verify through Ryzen Master. Perfect. Yep, we've hit it 4325 all across the board. But let's take a quick peek just for stability and run a Cinebench test and see how this turns out. Wow, and look at that, we've cracked 5048. We are well above the standard 4826. Actually, this is with a mild overclock to 4.2. So we've hit 4.33. We've overclocked the RAM. It's ran pretty stable here. I couldn't be happier. So probably the easiest overclock because you don't want to run your system at full capacity, 100 miles per hour, every single day, all day, is my all-day overclock. Now, it's fairly easy to get done, and most of these settings are going to be auto in the BIOS. I want to tell you up front that I will be using Precision Boost Overdrive. It does come in handy, especially for something that you want to run all day, because you do not have to monitor the parameters of what's happening in your system. For the RAM, we're just going to be running standard XMP profiles. We want about 3200 megahertz out of the RAM instead of the stock 2133. For the GPU, you could, if you jump into games and you want to use this overclock, you could just go into something like Radeon settings and do their standard automatic overclock, just like we did for the Gaming Overclock. Without further ado, let's jump in and I'll show you how I did this portion of the overclock. Okay, for your all-day overclock, let's go ahead. You don't really need to touch anything in here. You can go in, and I do believe there's Precision Boost Overdrive. You can enable it through the motherboard, which most people recommend you do. But today I'm going to be doing that through Ryzen Master. Let's go into overclocking the RAM. You'll probably have a couple profiles, right? Typically you're gonna want profile 1, and you can see here it's gonna adjust my DRAM frequency to 3200 megahertz. And this is it. This is all you have to do. Okay, so as you can see here, we've got our core clock adjusted here. We aren't getting what we were before. We are seeing it is capable of hitting 4.4 as a max speed. How do we go ahead and unlock that capability? We go into the game mode, and it looks like it's also in the creator mode. So what we want to do, gamer creator, we want to hit that Precision Boost Overdrive. If you want to play with the settings, go into your BIOS. We can apply and test, or we can just hit apply. Now, how do we know that that has taken place? Well, either through this stress test they offer in Ryzen Master, or go ahead and do your own. We're hitting 4100 on all cores during this test. Looks like it has taken. Now, the last thing that you want to do is, if you are gaming, again, hit that overclock button. Proceed. Let's check our memory. We are running 3200 megahertz, courtesy of the XMP profiles. So without further ado, you guys, man, it is bright outside today. There's a lot of sun coming in. I hope you got something out of the video, because I did spend a good amount of time putting these overclocks together and making sure that they make sense so you guys can actually utilize them in your builds. A little bit about what's coming up though, I want to tell you guys, you see this Lutron equipment here. I'm going to be doing a smart home makeover in the next video. I'm going to show you how to wire that in, how it functions, and how fun and easy it is to do, and what kind of functionality you can get. Hey, if you have any ideas for overclocks, maybe you have an experience with overclocking RAM, CPU, your GPU, running thermals, maybe you have a particular cooler you like, whether it's air or liquid, a particular piece of hardware or a case you enjoy using for your overclocking because it's given you benefits that you have to share with other people, then please comment below. That way we can all take a look and maybe enjoy the same benefits that you got. I'm one single person. I try to take the feedback that I get from you guys and put it in these videos. Sometimes I can do them, sometimes I can't, but I think I've really come up with 3 options for you if you do want to overclock, to do them without a massive risk, because it's been tested by me. Okay, the last bit of warning before I wrap up this video: if you are doing overclocking, be careful out there. Definitely ask other people's opinions who have done this before. Join in on some forums. We've got a great Techccessory forum getting started on Reddit. It's just Techccessory_forum. Go check it out, post some questions in there or put it down below. Join a forum on Facebook, on Reddit, wherever you are if you're unsure about your overclocking, because it can cause problems. So I don't want to be responsible for that. I want to give you guys good advice and tell you to please go check out those forums or comment here if you have questions. With that, I think we've pretty much wrapped up the video. I appreciate you guys for watching. We've reached that point where I ask you guys to do a couple simple things. So like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on, and definitely comment below if you have questions, like I said before. So you guys, as always, I'll catch you in the next video.